The second draft of the screenplay to Marnie states that somehow, in the gray limboistic loneliness of the station, only that handbag seems to have an aura of vitality. In part one of this video, we talked about the power of Marnie's yellow purse. Now let's open things up a bit and talk a bit more about that lonely railroad platform. As the scene unfolds, Marnie breaks away from the camera, and as I suggested last time, this could be a metaphor for her declaration of independence from the gaze of the camera, which is to say the gaze of men. In this world, men dominate and women submit, except for Marnie, who's found her own way out of that oppressive system, albeit at a huge cost. When that camera stops moving, it's as if we've reached a point where it, as a stand-in for the audience and the director, can go no further. This mysterious woman is on her own. Now, let's expand our view of the opening scene of Marnie to take a close look at the rest of the picture. In keeping with Hitch's overall painterly approach to the film, this opening shot is a throwback to his German expressionist influences. The graphic quality and violently harsh angles work in tension with the infinite depth of the point perspective that disappears into the center of the frame. The awning meets up with her shoulders and, to my eye at least, briefly gives her a witch's collar. Think Maleficent. As such, it's an entrance worthy of the diabolical Uncle Charlie's smoke-filled arrival in shadow of a doubt. The woman in the scene is powerful, triumphant. She's capable of evil. She's at the center of a web that is her domain and her trap. We're also seeing the first instance of the color red, in this case the safety line that she walks as if on a razor. It's interesting that her PTSD isn't being triggered by it, as will happen later. Instead, she owns that stripe as if she were on a Paris runway, a reminder that Tippi Hedren got her start as a model. It's kind of obvious that she's wearing a wig, which is strange because in a moment we're going to see her wash black dye from her hair. This is just one of many seeming discrepancies pointing up that we're in a world of extreme artifice. The deceit operates on multiple levels. And that fakery is important because, in fact, the main thing I want to point out here is simply that this scene, shot using a real actor on location in a real train station in Hartford, Connecticut, is nevertheless very stagey. It's composed like an abstract painting. These stark forms suggest to me the brutal angles of early German cinema that impressed young Hitchcock so deeply. The dagger-sharp lines of the point perspective also seem to quote Scotty's dream in Vertigo, which in turn may well have been influenced by Christopher Nevinson's painting Bursting Shell. We can say this because just a few years before, while working on North by Northwest, Hitch had conceived of that film as, in his words, abrupt and disjointed, like an early Nevinson painting, all jagged, angular shapes. So you can see how familiar he was with the artist, and also how his mind went about transubstantiating his influences into cinema. All of these allusions and echoes run by so fast and furious, it can be hard to keep up. However, keep one thing in mind. This potent scene has a strong flavor of unreality, as Hitch intended. Hitchcock author Tony Lee Morrill shared much from the transcripts of the production meetings in his book on Marnie. For instance, discussing the scene with screenwriter J. Preston Allen, Hitchcock said,
"It's unreal in a sense, but I've deliberately shown no other people around, not a soul. I feel that we ought to cheat like they do in the Italian films and have nobody around if we can, because otherwise we don't draw enough attention to the girl."
So that sense of the unreal was part of Hitchcock's plan. Remember that. And like his dinners at Chasen's, Hitch ordered up a do-over of this scene, this time with the director himself pausing to get a good look at Tippi, and then turning to see if we caught him. This motif of disappearing into the void of deep perspective repeats later. For instance, as Marnie rides Foreo off into the woods, possibly the only time she ever feels truly free. And yet, as with the train station, these moments are clouded with an air of unreality. In this case, by the cognitive dissonance of the artifice of the rear projection and the reality of the very real horse that she's riding. And by the way, this scene was another first for cinema. Hitch was the first director to put a horse on a treadmill in a studio and make it gallop for a trick shot. This cadence of receding images also sets up a pattern that's reversed to startling effect when Sean Connery's Mark Rutland stages his intervention. Back on the railway platform, she finally turns to the left and stops. Even that small gesture is significant. Here's why. Hitchcock sometimes liked to end his films just as they began, but with a twist. And he does the same thing with Marnie. At the end, having faced her demons and the truth about her past, she's now ready to give her trust to a man. A great deal for a Marnie Edgarundi. This final shot shows her taking off into the distance. This time, not with a bellhop, but with Sean Connery helping to carry her baggage. However, the infinite point perspective is cut short by the obviously painted backdrop of a harbor that opens up to the distant horizon. Marnie may have been unable to prevent Foreo from galloping into that brick wall, but this time, facing another wall, she turns safely away. Instead of turning to the left as she did at the train station, she and Mark turn right. Maybe that's an indication that she's now making better choices. If the film's end looks like a painting, it's because Hitch wanted it to be seen that way, just as the opening scene, shot on location, looks artificial. As Yale professor Bridget Poiker has said, it's precisely this constructed, aestheticized space, like so many in Hitchcock, that is so utterly in keeping with Marnie's meditation on the relation of illusion and reality. The ship is located where the vanishing point of the frame would be, but its painted quality renders it an image on a theater flat. Anyway, these deep perspective framings with their air of unreality telegraph that Marnie is elusive and evasive. She's running away, even if in metatextual reality and figuratively, she's running in place. It all fits neatly together, doesn't it? And if you still doubt that Hitch himself was thinking along those same lines, come back for part 3.